GM. This is Morning Markets. It is Thursday, the 18th of September. So yesterday we had FOMC. The Fed chose to cut rates by 25 basis points, which was expected by the market. Powell didn't say much of interest in his press conference. Usual classic politics style talk from him, where he doesn't really say much, but also seems to talk forever. So that was really the wrap up. Now, what does that mean for markets? Well, rate cuts are not the only thing that drives markets and drives Bitcoin. The probabilities of one interest rate cut varied from 50% to 90%, back to 70%, back to 100% throughout all of this period on Bitcoin. Yet price is in exactly the same place. So that literally proves that interest rates aren't the only thing that drives markets. And of course we know that there's many other things. But what we can do as traders is look at technical analysis, look at price action, because after all, we are not privy to all of the insider information. We are not privy to all of the new upcoming things that are moving markets to do with macro news, etc. We don't have access to all of that. And plus, even if we did, it would be very hard to pinpoint which one is actually driving the market. And that's fine. That's why we don't trade off news. That's why I don't recommend trading based off something you read or some economic data analysis. No, the only leading indicator we have is price. And that's why we trade the charts. So let's look at the daily closes from yesterday. So Bitcoin closed within the range, which I mentioned in the market update is decent. Obviously, it's not extremely super turbo bullish. That would have been a nice full-bodied candle up to 120. But it's also not bearish, because as long as we don't close below Monday's low, which is over here, Bitcoin is consolidating within an internal uptrend. So the trend is your friend. You expect a direction to remain up until you see a reversal signal. And the clearest reversal signal would be losing Monday's low as it stands right now. Or of course, it could be from higher, where let's say we go up, we then have a sweep, we then close below. And you see that market structure break over here. That could also be a reversal signal and shows another example of how it could play out. So for now, trend is your friend. We closed within the consolidation, so that's what you'd want to see. Yes, we didn't have a turbo bull candle, but everyone was expecting volatility on FOMC. And if everyone's expecting it, then that means they're positioned for it, either long or short in advance. And if everyone's positioned for it, that's going to dampen volatility. The big volatility events in the market come from news which people weren't expecting. That's why you get the name Black Swan event, because it literally means it's out of the ordinary. And that's what provides the most volatility. So no surprise we've not seen much volatility. Look at the lower time frames even. Go to the 1 hour chart here. We're seeing Bitcoin had a move back down, but where did it stop, guys? On the exact FOMC candle yesterday, so this was 6 p.m. UTC, when the interest rate decision was made, price dumped right back to the value area low, which I've been mentioning to you guys for weeks and weeks now. That's where bulls stepped in again, which is all good. And now we push to a new high towards that daily close and early hours of the morning during the Asian session. So interesting to see what happens here. As I mentioned, all the way back here, flipping the value area low. That was the trade of the week. If we reclaim it, then it sets up a move to the POC and the value area high and potentially beyond. And that trade of the week is playing out here as follows. This is from the weekly ledger video. If you missed it, make sure you go check it out. It's from a couple days ago. You can find it pinned in my Discord channel, going over a high time frame view of the markets. But this trade is so far doing everything you'd want it to do. It's holding the daily 12 and 21 bands. That's also where this dip came to yesterday. That got bought up by bulls, so great sign. As I mentioned, you don't want to see price go below those bands. That's why I have the invalidation below them from when we entered. And it's now moved up towards that POC, which becomes the level to flip before the value area high. So what's going to be most interesting is, of course, the New York session to see how this continues playing out. But this is a multi-day, potentially multi-week hold trade. So not really looking at low time frame to dictate any changes on here. It's going to be based off a daily chart. So also watching the daily close each day to reassess this position. Ideally, you want to see this daily close be above yesterday's high. That would signal some sort of strength today, and in my eyes should set up for then continuation towards the value area high, because then we're building another higher high, and that is bullish uptrending structure. High highs and higher lows, right? And unless the value area low is lost and these daily bands are lost, the trend is up at the moment. So that's a quick update on the trade of the week. Back to Bitcoin on the lower time frame. So another thing I wanted to mention was this 115.7K level. So if we go to the monthly chart, you'll see that this was here. I'll mark it in purple so that you guys can see it just for this video. So it was the open of last month's candle. Now, if Bitcoin can start pushing up towards these highs, what you get, as I mentioned in the weekly ledger, is bulls are trying to turn August monthly candle into a bullish order block. If we can get above and close it, like many examples here. So as soon as you make new highs over here, that turns this candle into a bullish order block. When you fail and don't manage to close above, that leads to a reversal down. So if we can close above August high, well, that is obviously your ultimate bullish signal from this FOMC event. So the level to watch is August close at 115.7. You don't want to now fall back below that, as that then risks bulls having failed an attempt to turn this into a bullish order block. And if that fails, then you can see in examples like this candle here, where price, let's remove this, price tried to wick above this level. So at one point in time, this candle was closing above the open of April 2024. However, sellers came in, pushed the candle back down, leaving a wick. That then leads to further chop and consolidation and bleed lower. Whereas when you get the close actually officially above the order block, like we did here, that leads to then continuation. So going back to the lower time frames, it would be nice if intraday today and tomorrow, this 115.7K level can hold. That suggests that structure is actually building nicely, which it is in this rally so far. This is a nice consolidation, and ultimate invalidation is of course that value area low. Don't want to lose that. So H4 trend is holding on Bitcoin as well. So I can see that the H450 produced a new high there. Good to see. H4 bands are also green, so everything seems to be moving pretty decently. Again, if we can stay above 115.7, that would be strong. And I would like to see the value area low hold again if we do come back down, because if it doesn't, then potentially opens up for a further flush to 113.3. And below there, likely this uptrend is over and we need to put in a double bottom. So that's all the scenarios. Everything for now is good. Trend is your friend. And right now we are attempting to break out of a consolidation with an uptrend. So that's the wrap up for BTC. If we look at other coins, how did they close? So let's check something like Ethereum. We'll actually go to this chart here. Again, just chopping between these two levels, ranging as expected. Nothing much of interest on ETH here. Pretty weak, but holding these daily 12 and 21 bands for now. So as expected, flows are in Bitcoin. When it comes to Solana, let's take a look at how it closed for the daily. So much more interesting on Solana. We front run the daily 12 and 21 bands yesterday on the FOMC dip. We've had a decent close, getting back above 240. And really, what this now is setting up a consolidation box where you now want to look which way does this break, and potentially you can go on lower time frames to do that. If you can get a nice clean 4-hour breakout above, then potentially you move to your 1-hour bands, trade these 12 and 21 bands as they progress higher. So that would look something like this, where you initially get the break above, that's your confirmation, and then you trade these H1 bands, any wicks into them towards 260 and above. But for now, decent move on Solana, especially compared to Ethereum. It's consolidating nicely in this box and decent retracement back up to the range highs of this box. So seeing that H450 EMA produce the trend support currently on Solana. So also another key trend support band to watch for it to continue respecting and continue to hold, and still need to see it produce new highs to show that respect, because of course this could be a lower high. It is coming into resistance, but given the way the chart's set up and its outperformance against Ethereum and altcoins, looks pretty decent, and looks like Sol still has some juice left in its rally, as that's one of the better reactions across altcoins from FOMC, and even a better reaction than Bitcoin, since it had a green daily close, whereas Bitcoin had a red daily close. So keep an eye on Solana for sure. Use your lower time frame trend support bands. Watch for the lower time frame breakout of this consolidation. And looks like it wants to actually hit probably 260, and from there, potentially any of these highs. So of course, we've got the all-time high liquidity here at 295. That could be a target, and you have a cluster of liquidity starting around 270 here, which could be what bulls are looking to target. So while the momentum is here on Sol, while it's clearly got demand given it's had a nice green daily close, look for any low time frame trend continuation signals to trade it towards some of these higher levels. Looks good, looks like it's strong. And if we check something like Sol Bitcoin, let's see. Nice. So mentioned a while back, if Sol BTC can close above this range low level here, that would be a good sign, and that's what we got. So weekly closed above, now closing a few daily candles above there, which is also very welcome for any Solana bulls, which even if it's a lower high, sets up for a bounce and continued Solana outperformance against Bitcoin, which is interesting. So keep an eye on this chart, watch these two levels. You've got this 0.02 level. If Solana Bitcoin can hold above that, that probably sets up for continued outperformance. And overall, bullish reversal is playing out. So watch it to move higher as it heads into some of this resistance over there. And that's going to allow Sol to be one of the favorites if we do see some decent rallies. And checking Sol Ethereum quickly, also seeing this have a nice rally. So I think this was from the weekly ledger. I mapped out these paths, seeing that continued outperformance against Ethereum. So now you're just watching when it hits this 50-week EMA, the purple line, which it's respected as support here throughout the rallies, and then flipped into resistance here once this topping formation formed and we had that sweep. So if we reach that 50 EMA again, watch for how Solana reacts to it. Does it flip it into support, or does it hold as resistance? And that will offer insights into whether it's going to continue outperforming. So that is everything Bitcoin, ETH, and Solana. Looking at hype quickly. So last week in the morning markets videos, I told you guys, watch for the daily 12 and 21 bands for the next trade on hype. I didn't take this trade, but look how beautifully that played out. You wicked right into that 12 EMA band, produced a new high already. As I mentioned, the game on hype is to trade it between $50 up to $60 once we saw this close above, and playing out pretty beautifully so far. So GM to any of you that did catch this trade that I mentioned last week. Beautiful setup, and now seeing it potentially hit that $60 level in the coming days, 2 weeks. So keep an eye out on that and watch for any signs of low time frame trend reversals and momentum weakness. But for now, that looks solid. We've had a really nice move off of FOMC. Very bullish for hype. So again, you have to be selective with your altcoins. Rate cuts, they always have been more bullish for altcoins, but we're in a weird dynamic in the market where Bitcoin should actually have some outperformance. But at the same time, you do have your strong altcoins with narratives like hype, your strong altcoins like Sol, which are allowed to have some outperformance and some runs. But generally, we're seeing you have to be super selective and know where the winners are and find them, like hype, a prime example of one of those winners. So all looks good there. If we look at total 3, just to get a gauge of the altcoin index, again, good close, nice to see. We're getting above this high. We ray trace back to the daily 12 and 20 EMA bands, also back testing this compression pattern as support. And now we're pushing back above the highs, which should set up for some continuation again in those strong altcoins. Now, like I said, you can't just pick any altcoin. Go back to Ethereum, for example. Ethereum yesterday had a green day, but hasn't even hit Monday's high yet. Whereas the total free index, which is altcoins excluding Bitcoin and Ethereum, Monday's high is here. It's flipped it. So you can see that relative outperformance on certain altcoins, and that's how you know if you've got a strong altcoin or not. It's simply by doing that comparison, looking at the levels against this index. And why is hype so strong? Well, I'll show you exactly why. Now, obviously, there are many reasons for this. Hype has a great narrative, and it is a new and shiny coin. However, if you just look at it from a chart perspective, here's total 3, the altcoin index. Here's hype. If you look at total 3, it's high on Saturday, the 13th of September. It's currently below, whereas hype is above its high from Saturday, the 13th of September. So that tells you capital demand is flowing into hype at a greater pace than it is the rest of the altcoin market. So that shows you where the winners are. It's one quick way to do it. And of course, there are many other ways to do it as well. So a little bit of alpha there. In a previous monthly outlook, I've deep dived into this concept. I believe it's either the June or July outlook, where I did a whole section on this to identify how outperformance. It's actually how I identified hype all the way back here during June, July months. And now, as you can see, been a big outperformer. So just a little bit of alpha for you guys there. Moving on back to the market. So now let's have a zoom in at how the wider markets reacted to FOMC. So FOMC, Wednesday, 17th. Let's remove this orange line. You can all see this was gold's FOMC reaction. This was stocks FOMC reaction. And this was the dollar's FOMC reaction. Very, very interesting. So mentioned in yesterday's morning market video, this low was absolutely not safe, especially when you saw funding start ticking up. So that's where traders put their stop loss. That got taken instantly, so can remove that level. And on the actual interest rate decision candle, we got very close to Tuesday's low, but didn't actually take it by a few dollars on at least Bybit perpetual futures. We then took the high over here. So what did we get? We got that classic whipsaw. It's exactly what I told you to look out for in FOMC. Watch for sweeps of liquidities both sides. Now you've got that. So from here, very key to see which side breaks next. Is it going to be this high over here? Or is it going to be this low? And at the lowest, Monday's low, which is almost the ultimate signal of the next direction based on this meeting. If we close above this high and can start holding it, almost sets up for continuation to 120 and potentially all-time highs. And if we close below Monday's low over here, then that sets up a retracement of some of these rallies. So that is what I'm looking at in terms of Bitcoin on the 1 hour. Seeing these charts lag a little bit. I think we're back now. So what did we see on gold? Well, gold initially had a wick down and then it wicked all the way up, taking this liquidity over here, which is great to see because it produced a bearish reversal candle. That then filled in this entire gap here, which I mentioned to look out for in yesterday's video, which during that gap fill, if you watch my cursor on both gold and Bitcoin, you can see Bitcoin uptrended while gold filled in the gap. Very, very simple. So that's what you now want to see. You don't want to see gold start reclaiming this high. That would probably set up for Bitcoin to downtrend if gold starts then continuing its uptrend. Instead, you actually want to see gold reject anywhere really at these liquidity levels if it's going to take them. And the New York session will be the one to wait for to see if gold is going to do that. That's where you get the big flows and the real moves happen. So you just want to see any rejection and continuation of this chop and downtrend on gold. Any big, strong reclaim is likely going to set up for Bitcoin to lose some levels and have to chop downwards, which falls back into its consolidation. So that's how gold reacted. Currently trading below its FOMC open. Bitcoin currently trading above its FOMC open. Now when it comes to stocks, currently also trading above its FOMC open. And the dollar currently trading above its FOMC open. So let's take this pen off here. When it comes to stocks, they are breaking out this morning to new all-time highs on the futures market, which is going to create a gap on the cash version of the S&P. So stocks are liking it. Bullish reaction so far here we can see to FOMC, which should set up for risk on moves. That is why you're seeing some decent moves on altcoins, especially those select few. Very nice to see. You want this chart to be strong because it is a gauge of risk appetite in the crypto market. So that's a good reaction to rate cuts. Historically, I know rate cuts on the S&P after a long pause have typically been bullish, barring the economy entering recession. So good to see that on the S&P. And really, you just want to now watch this candle on any retest for trend continuation higher. But again, what did this FOMC candle do? It retraced the gap over here, which I also mentioned in yesterday's morning market video. So that's how the charts work. That's how TA works. It's not magic, but can offer decent setups if you have systems around this stuff. So any retests in this box, you'd want to see hold as support. Now the dollar, probably most interesting. It swept its local liquidity and put in a reversal on the interest rate decision. Now, if we flick to something like the daily on the dollar over here, it becomes a little bit more clear. Actually get out of this chart here. Let's go to DXY. It's attempting to put in a bullish reversal, sweeping this liquidity, which would potentially shake things up for risk assets if this did continue higher and flip these 12 and 21 bands, flip this 50 EMA band, push up towards this 99 range low level from over here. All of this range, we're currently under it now and back testing as resistance. So everything sets up for downtrend continuation on the dollar, which is typically good for risk assets. Therefore, interesting to see the next move. Really, do we close below this low here and invalidate the bullish reversal? Or do we start to get above this 50 EMA? Do we start to flip it as support, start to close above it and push higher? That potentially could be met with a risk off move. Now, of course, doesn't mean Bitcoin's guaranteed to dump or pump. As we've seen, dollar goes up, dollar goes down, Bitcoin pumps, Bitcoin dumps, and vice versa. However, generally, when the dollar goes up, it is a risk off style move. So that's something to keep in mind. It did have a bullish reversal attempt off FOMC. So now let's see which direction it picks. Can it flip resistance, or does resistance hold and just continue this downtrend, which should allow risk assets to really continue on. So that is the main update for the macro assets. If we take a quick look at the low time frame reaction in altcoins, so we saw Solana with a very nice move off the FOMC candle, coming into resistance though. So this is how time frames matters a lot. Yes, Solana had a better day reaction to FOMC than Bitcoin had, but Bitcoin's also not trending up into resistance right now. It's trending up into breakout territory within this uptrend on the 1 hour. Whereas Sol, yes, it trended up harder, but it's trending into resistance. So while you're seeing that outperformance yesterday off the decision, still Bitcoin is taking precedence for me. It is where the strength is because it's got that better structure since it's breaking out into new highs, which would be the equivalent of Sol breaking out above 250, which is the high it's set around here. So overall, good reaction. Seeing outperformance on alts based off the decision, but Bitcoin has the nicer structure, as you can see. So it's all about time frame sometimes. Yes, something can be outperforming on the 1 hour, but doesn't mean it's outperforming on the 4 hour or the daily. Of course, your low time frames lead into your higher time frames, but your lower time frames can have more false signals. That's how time frames work. Ethereum. So again, had a better reaction on the day than Bitcoin, closed the day green, but again, you're coming into resistance. So that's where Bitcoin has the better setup. And that really is it for altcoins. So we're really seeing what I laid out in morning markets just play out nicely here. We're seeing what I laid out last week in morning markets with trade setups and things like hype playing out very nicely here. So overall, happy with the state of the market right now. And that is really the full update wrapped up. Only other thing I want to touch on. So I saw this. SEC approves generic ETF listings, clearing the path for crypto ETF listings without individual approval. Get ready for a wave of spot crypto ETP launches in coming weeks and months. And it's from a reputable source. This guy works at Bloomberg, and he's been really tracking all of the ETF updates. So yes, this is interesting. I think a lot of people are going to get too bullish on this. And in the short term, is this bullish? Yes. I think you are going to see a wave of altcoins get ETFs launches over and over and over, one after the other, one after the other. But let's get a fresh chart here. Much like the Bitcoin treasury strategy situation where you have MSTR, if this will load. It's not loading right now, but what I'm trying to say is Bitcoin had the best ETF launch. So the Bitcoin ETF launch was like this. Let's go to the 1 hour chart. Bitcoin ETF launch was like this. Most successful ETF launch in history. The ETH ETF launch started off horribly. It's only in the past few weeks we've seen it actually gain some inflows. So its success was more like this. You now see a Sol ETF creeping in, only one issuer at the moment. So it's had minimal success, more like this. And that's going to be the trend for every ETF, I'm afraid, guys. You're going to see it have less and less impact, like those Russian dolls. If you guys know what I'm talking about, you have the big doll, then it gets smaller, then it gets smaller, then it gets smaller, then it gets smaller. Because it loses edge. Much like how the expectation of volatility of FOMC dampens volatility. Well, the first ETF was the ETF, which we'd never seen before in crypto. So no one really could map out any accurate expectations for it. That's why it had such a bullish effect on BTC. That's why it was so successful, because no one was positioned correctly for it, because it was impossible to position correctly for it, because we'd never seen Bitcoin ETFs on Wall Street. By the time the Ethereum ETF launched, well, we had seen one ETF. We now had some data. People could position for it in advance because they knew more so what to expect. Still, it was a brand new ETF. It was the first altcoin ETF, so it's had some pretty decent success, not as good as Bitcoin, and that's why it's less successful. And then when you get to the Sol ETF, we've already seen ETH, we've already seen Bitcoin. Traders now know what to expect even more. They have more data, so the volatility becomes more muted. There's less chance of it being something that people don't expect. So then you see the reaction is even less, and Sol ETFs has so far been even less successful. And when a Doge ETF or an XRP ETF arrives, it's going to be the same old thing, guys. I think these ETFs will likely trigger some short-term huge rallies on XRP, Doge, or whatever gets an ETF. Don't get me wrong, that day it launches is going to be immense. It's going to be a bunch of volume on the asset, and it's going to lead to a huge pump. But I think insiders are going to use that as exit liquidity. They're going to sell into it because the reaction is going to get more and more muted. That's just how it works. And if you don't believe me, we saw the exact same thing with the Bitcoin treasury companies. So you look at MSTR. This was the first company. This was Saylor. First company to adopt a Bitcoin treasury strategy. You see a nice big chart. This was one of the best trades in 2024. Went over 10x. In the stock market, that is insane returns. You then have copycats like MetaPlanet. And that's its respective chart. So this was the next Bitcoin treasury company that popped up. Have a look at that. Expectations versus reality, guys. The more an event is expected, the more it gets priced in and pre-positioned for, the less bullish it's going to be. There's less surprise. There's less of a what if effect. You know, the reason assets like Mana and Sand rallied so hard last cycle in 2021 and you got that alt season was because no one really understood what it does. And if you don't understand what it does, you can't price it in. You can't map out your expectations for it. And that is what allows assets to go crazy high, way higher than they should go. And you even saw this cycle with something like FET. I mean, can any of you with a straight face tell me what the hell FET does? Let's be honest, none of you can. But what matters? Number goes up. That's all that matters as us, as traders, as investors. And the reason FET rallied so hard is because no one knew what the hell it did. How can you price it in? How can you have expectations for an asset you don't understand? That's what allows it to get stupid rallies and pump and pump and pump higher than it ever should have. But when you have Metaplanet come in as the second, third, fourth, fifth company to adopt the Bitcoin treasury strategy, you know what to expect. We've already seen Saylor do it. And then you have these Ethereum companies. You've got ETHZilla. So it gets worse and worse. Just look at how much worse this price action is compared to even the Bitcoin treasury copycats. Because now you're seeing the second Russian doll. As I mentioned, you've got Bitcoin. If you go to the 15-minute chart quickly, you've got Bitcoin, the first ETF, which is the biggest mover, the most successful. And then when the ETH ETF comes, it's less successful. And it's the same for treasury companies. The first Bitcoin treasury company has the best price reaction. Now, when you're getting your first ETH treasury companies, the reaction is even more muted. And this is what's going to happen with ETFs, guys. So don't get too excited when it comes to all of these ETFs. Yes, they're going to pump initially. They're going to absolutely moon, but likely it gets used as exit liquidity. And the more and more ETFs or ETPs that launch, the less of a bullish reaction the next one and the next one is going to have. So watch out for that. Of course, bullish short term, it's just medium to long term. Once those get launched, likely it's going to lead to some tops across those alts. So don't be a sucker. Don't buy into it. It's always these events which lead to the top. We all know this. So keep an eye out for that and actually look the other way instead of what your average trader is looking at these ETFs as, which is just turbo bullish. We're going 10x to the moon. Those guys are going to always lose. And if you're positioned correctly, you can be dumping on them when that happens because you know what to actually look for as a professional trader. So just a quick rant there to wrap up. That is morning markets. I'll see you in the next one.